Have you all heard of Milarepa? Anyone not heard of Milarepa? Milarepa? Right, Milarepa. So he's a very famous and much loved figure in Tibetan Buddhism. He was a yogin hermit who lived in the high Himalayas. He meditated all the time, would only come down occasionally. And then he was quite eccentric when he did come down. Didn't even bother to wear clothes sometimes. But he was a great poet, a great singer. He sang his songs of realization. And so he's a very... he's... Yeah, all the different lineages sort of look up to Milarepa as... He was a first-generation Tibetan yogi, great master. Before that, the great masters had at least been to India and got the teaching, but his teacher was Tibetan and he was Tibetan. It's like first generation Westerner who makes it. He was first generation Tibetan who made it. So he's very important figure in the Kagyu lineage, and Guru Rinpoche is a very important figure in the Nyingma lineage, and the Kagyu Nyingmas, like us, they're important figures together for us, so that our connection is very strongly Kagyu, Milarepa line, Nyingma, Guru Rinpoche line. Yeah, it's the main figures that we focus on.
Thank you.
Okay, so now your questions. I guess I'll just start somewhere. Yes, I think I'll start with the one where you were actually addressing the question about awareness. Where's it gone? Where's my bit of paper with that on? What's this one? Yes. So could you say there are two aspects of awareness, a natural quality of awareness and the activity of paying attention to different aspects of our experience? Because we do use the word differently, don't we? Instead of, we talk about turning your awareness towards something, as if it's something that you do. You become more aware of something, so you can actively do it. And then sometimes you're talking about, we have this quality of awareness, naturally, doesn't go anywhere. Or you could even go so far as to say, awareness is all that we have. It's almost like, and it's used for different words in the translation. So for example, you might have heard the term rigpa, or in Sanskrit that would be vidya. That's often translated as awareness. And it doesn't very often it doesn't even say or warn you that it's talking about vidya or rigpa, the opposite of avidya. And that's really something that never changes. It's our awakened nature, really, the awakened nature of reality. So that when you're using awareness for that, it never changes. It's not conditioned. It is actually not different from Buddha. So that's vidya, awareness. And then when we think about our own experience, like we tend to think of awareness when we're awake and conscious. And then you go to sleep, or unconscious, then your awareness has gone somewhere. So what kind of awareness is that? Because your vidya aspect can't go anywhere. So what's the awareness that sometimes is bright and sometimes is dull, or that we sometimes think has gone altogether. It's an interesting one, isn't it? It's almost like when you remove the clouds, that's one thing. When the clouds are there, that's another thing. So removing the clouds, we think, oh, my awareness is expanding. Actually, well, it looks like that, but actually I've been removing what was getting in the way. And that's a very interesting thing to contemplate. Oh, when I fall asleep or I drift off, does anything actually go anywhere? It's a really interesting thing to explore. I thought my mind just went off somewhere. Where could it have gone? And where is it now? That it is not an accurate description, but it's something. If you become aware of that in your meditation, you become much clearer in your mind that your thinking is so wrong. Actually, how could I be so wrong? How could I hold on to such a wrong view that my awareness went somewhere? It can't be. Or even that it is anywhere. So then that changes the whole ball game in terms of what is awareness. Because if awareness doesn't go anywhere, or if it does even, but if it doesn't, then what's happening when the scenery changes? So something is coming into awareness rather than awareness is going somewhere. Or is that even true? In fact, is anything one says about it true? And then when that happens in the meditation, when you're in a meditative state, you're just slightly dropping these little questions into your meditation, a bit like a pebble in a pool. You're like, what happens when I drop that pebble in the pool? Like, oh, very strange experience. Nowhere, can't be nowhere, or what do I mean by somewhere? And you let that just gently ripple through your body and mind and awareness. You might find something starts to loosen up. Like you can start to open your mind to possibilities that before had seemed very unlikely and unreal. You think, well, actually my view is so wrong. These things that seem unlikely and unreal, it's just my idea. Actually, there's greater possibilities, vaster possibilities, more wonderful possibilities than I had allowed myself to entertain, even because I had such a fixed idea of, well, even such a funny thing as, that I lost my awareness, it went somewhere. But how could it, if it comes back intact, where could it have been to preserve itself if it went somewhere? Or it disappeared, or if it was in the past, if it disappeared into the past. We tend to think, the awareness of a moment ago, or a day ago, or a year ago has gone. We tend to think that. But if it had, how did it ever come back? Where did it come from? Intact, with all its, the whole of you comes back. Each moment. How? And maybe it doesn't. This is in the Satipatthana Sutta. It tells us to look at our experience, look at our body, look at our feelings, look at our mind, look at the various dharmas, and it goes through the list of dharmas. And it says, one of the things it tells you to look at is to see the nature of its arising and the nature of its, what is it? Ending? No. Cessation, yeah. Passing away, yes. The nature of its arising. Does awareness actually arise? Or was it already there? Does it actually cease? Or is it not of the nature of something that ceases? Or if you're taking something like, you think something's impermanent and changing, how does it arise? Where from? How? How does it cease? Where does it go? What happens to it? Is that really the end of it? Is there no further consequences? Or did it cease? Or did it? Is the idea of something arising and staying something my mind imposes on reality? It certainly does. But is it true or is it not true? And if it's not true, what does that imply? What does that make possible that I thought was not possible? And if my original view is true, how? Okay, keep going back to it and looking to see, well, I still think like that. Okay, so what are you really thinking? And in the sense of experiencing. So this isn't like an intellectual exercise, it's just a reality checking exercise. Is that actually true? Or is that my thinking? Does it leave me in a strange place of my thinking isn't right? So now what? Can I just be simple without imposing my thinking on my experience? And this can go very, very subtle, actually. Very deep and very subtle. And normally it progresses by a fraction of a second. You get just a fraction of a second of a sense. It's possible. And it's almost like glimpsing something out of the corner of your eye or through a little gap in the wall, and then you lost it again. But just enough to be tantalizing, especially when you keep noticing the way you think already doesn't work. So you need to do the two things in a meditative way. Just, it really doesn't. Double check, does it? No, it really doesn't. Everybody thinks like that. Maybe they do, but it doesn't work. You know, and then, is there another possibility? Just a hint of something. Just keep playing with that in a very sort of open way, without trying to, which of course one inevitably does, try to grab something, which is interesting, because when you've grabbed something, what do you find the next thing happens is you realise it doesn't work. It doesn't inspire me. Everything's gone dead. I've lost it again. What am I doing? Trying to think it. So it doesn't work, does it? It's again coming back to that very meditatively. It doesn't work, so it's kind of quite humbling, because it's undermining you. But then actually the whole of our experience of samsara undermines us. There isn't any choice. You can try to think something that feels a bit safe and then find it's undermined, or you can undermine yourself. Learn to trust something that you can't grasp. You're still here. You've seen through that your thinking is false. You've seen through your thinking that it's false, and you're still here. And you've glimpsed something else, and you're still here. So keep going. Gradually the balance will shift from really somehow being stuck in the way you think to feeling a sense of something opening up, that you feel more and more confidence in it, which is the dawning, if you like, of the faculty of faith. You've just more confidence in it, you've got more trust in it, just a bit. If someone said, do you have faith in it, you'd say no. But actually you keep going, so you must have. So you can reassure yourself somehow that must be faith that's keeping you going. Certainly a sense of abhorrence for the wrong way of thinking. You've had enough of it. It's so deadly, so deadening, so false, so easily undermined. As you practice more, there's the sense of disillusionment in your old way of being increases, which is a sign of progress. You're more uncomfortable. Oh, that's good. You're making progress. So you could say that you could call any of that awareness in a way, couldn't you? You become more aware of your old way of thinking. You become more aware of other possibilities. And you're using awareness the whole time, which in a way is sati, isn't it? Sati itself, you could use the word awareness for sati. You're becoming aware. You're using your awareness. You're becoming aware. So it's a nice word, and I find as a translator, I overuse it. Because there's so many different aspects of the teaching that awareness is a good word to use, but then, of course, I'm using it in different contexts in different ways, so I do the usual translator thing of putting the Sanskrit word alongside the translation so you know what it is. But that's why I was asking you this morning, what is awareness? Well, you're using the word, and you can tell me what you're using it for. There isn't any rule saying, it's only one way you can use it. And it's a good question, because we use the word mind, don't we? I think that mind we use very much for thinking as well, don't we? Whereas awareness we don't use for thinking, generally. So you've got this word in Sanskrit, chitta, mind, or heart. It's got the whole sense of space that thoughts come into. It also is the thoughts that come into the mind. It's also the heart. It's what we are in our heart of hearts, our being. It is the nature of our chitta that we're seeking to understand. So if you use just mind for that, you tend to miss out the more awareness, the spacious, or the heart aspects of it. I don't know if awareness is particularly associated with the heart. I think, say heart awareness. I don't think particularly, is it? It's sort of like a kind of space. The way it's either a kind of space or it's a quality that I bring to bear on things. I have some kind of almost I have some volition over where I'm going to apply it, which I think must be the more sati aspect of it, the deliberate application of mindfulness. So it's the most interesting question, isn't it? Yeah, in English you or even in probably with sati as well, you're using sati or you're using awareness to enhance sati or enhance awareness. We don't, language isn't that accurate, isn't that precise, is it? But somehow, what else are you using using mindfulness to increase mindfulness? But what is the mindfulness? It's an aspect of awareness, isn't it? Or the mind, or the intelligence, or your being, or yourself. Yeah, it's an aspect of yourself. It is an aspect of you, what you are. A very puzzled look on your face. Maybe that was about something altogether different.
It was about the pain in my knee, actually. Don't let that stop you.
Okay, so did anyone want to ask anything more about that?
When you're asleep,
Yeah.
because it's like you're aware you've been asleep when you wake up.
Yeah.
So I suppose you could do the same thing. It's like, where do I think the awareness went? Or
Yeah.
you could question that in the morning.
You can, yes. And could it possibly be that just because you don't remember, that your awareness wasn't there? Which then raises questions about when you die. Just because you're dead, does that mean your awareness is not there? Well, where was it when you were alive? So what's dying got to do with it? So there you are. Something to ponder on. Okay. Next question. If the nature of reality is insubstantial, and the nature of our
mind. Do you want me to read it?
Is insubstantial. What is that word? Then what is our point of reference? It's very clear, but I can't read it. Odd.
That was my question.
Okay, if it's the nature of reality is insubstantial.
Yes. And if the nature of our mind is insubstantial, then when we're faced with something that is uncomfortable and we're in that space where something is uncomfortable, where is the point of reference in that gap? Followed on from the other question that we were talking about, isn't it?
How we can bring a shift to that gap between opening and closing, that's different, isn't it? And solidifying. How do we stay open and raw when it's painful or frightening? The thing is, we don't recognise that insubstantiality, do we? We don't, if I understand your question. But how do we do it?
I thought that if everything is impermanent, we're taught that the nature of reality is not really as solid as we think it is. And if our mind is not solid either, then what is the point of reference that we have? Do we not have a point of reference?
Or what is it that we're falsely perceiving?
Yes.
Basically, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. What is you could say, what is the consensus reality even? That would be one, like if you're looking at my hand and I'm looking at my hand, then what are we looking at if there isn't anything there?
Yes.
Yeah, and all associated questions, which is most questions that we have. Yeah, it's something that generally speaking get people's, I don't know, Buddhist teachers tend to slide over this question because it is actually not accessible to the unenlightened mind, and therefore you have to wait till you're enlightened. But of course, if we're going to have faith and confidence in this system, we want some sort of answer before we start. I mean, I think that's only reasonable. And what is it that's there that we're misperceiving? Like, for example, the famous example of the rope and the snake.
Mm-hmm.
Are you all familiar with that? When it's pre-Buddhist even, I think, the idea that in the dark you see a piece of rope and you think it's a snake. So you're terrified until the morning when you see actually there never was a snake, it always was a coil of rope. So what was the snake that you were so scared of all night that produced so much fear in you? It wasn't in the rope, but there was a rope. And I think that's what you're saying.
Yes, that's right.
So what is it that we're spinning off and misperceiving?
Yes.
It's interesting because it's reality before we have perceived it and created our particular take on it.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that? So it's you can't really talk about it in a sense because as soon as you talk about it, you're representing it by something that isn't it. Nonetheless, it is it. So this is we have this conversation. I have this conversation with Rigzin Shikpo a lot, and I also talk about it with Tibetan Khenpo sometimes. And the word we end up using most is Dhammatta and the Dhammatta Nidanas. So at the beginning we did the prayer to Milarepa. The essence of dependent arising is the Dhammatta. The Dhammatta, which is the essence of all dependent arising. There is the reality that how can we say that we're once the Vijnana, once the non-comprehending mind is trying to relate to reality, it always distorts it from that moment on. But it must have had an intuition of the reality, or it wouldn't have anything to distort. So there's always, if you like, contained in every perception, a true knowing of something, actually, in some sense, which we then impose our view on. Okay, this is an object, it's outside, and this is me on the inside, or this is in time, or it's in space. We impose all that on it. But there is something that we're imposing it on. But what is that? And if that's the Dhammatta, normally speaking, I think there's a tendency to think Dhammatta is the empty nature of all the Dhammas. So it seems like it would be formless, structureless, amorphous. But actually it's not. In the Heart Sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, feeling is emptiness, emptiness is feeling. So it's not amorphous, it isn't dead matter or dead space. It's, the samskaras, the consciousness is everything is empty, emptiness is these things. So what does emptiness mean? It means it's before you've created any kind of, you haven't put any conceptual overlay on it or interpretation on it. It is simply what it is, which is, it can't be known in that way. It's not graspable. So within that there is structure, and the structure is, beyond what we can normally conceptualize. Although, I think what is interesting is Shikpo talks about, well, what is mathematics then? Because you take a mathematical entity, you don't find it in the material world, you don't find it in your mind, it's just in the structure of things. It's just, take a point, a simple point. It has no dimensions. Well, if it's no dimensions, it's not in space. So where is it? What is it? And then you can actually, we've carried this is perhaps the great flowering of Western culture, that we've taken this way of talking, through using mathematical symbols. We can talk about things that you can't really talk about in any other way. So it's, as Shikpo was saying the other day, it's kind of somewhere halfway between what can be talked about and what can't be talked about. So there is, you can say more about what can't be talked about than perhaps has been traditionally thought. But then, mathematicians to this day are still wondering, what is mathematics? What is it? Is it something real that we're discovering, or is it something we're making up with our minds? And there's two schools of thought still within the mathematical world, which it is. I know which side I come down on. I know nothing about mathematics except the most basic things. So I think you have to think, yes, there is this mysterious reality, which in Buddhism is called the five jnanas, or the jnanakaya, or the three kayas of the Buddha, or it's described in these kind of terms. But that is reality itself, that we are mistaking for what it isn't, through the way we're thinking. So by loosening up on the way we think, we get a glimpse of something, another way of knowing, which we must have, or we wouldn't be able to think. Do you see what I'm saying? You wouldn't be able to, you must know there's a rope there at some level, otherwise you couldn't mistake it for a snake.
But that's very uncomfortable, being
Yes.
in that
Yes,
middle
it is.
way of knowing,
Yeah,
and knowing a little bit how it's working.
Must be.
But it's an uncomfortable place to be.
yes.
Because
Yes.
you can see it's not real, but it is real.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, that's right. That's why they
So what
always
do you do
say,
then?
so when they're teaching emptiness, for example, they always say, but you must believe in the causes and effects of karma. And you can't, every time, every story, everywhere, every instruction, teaching emptiness, but you must believe in karma, you must believe in the effects of karma. Why are they stressing that so much at that point? Because there's a danger that you will think, oh, well, there isn't anything, it doesn't matter what I do. And they're saying, oh, no. It's all very real, but it's not there. Don't mess around with it. Have tremendous respect for it. You can't see how that's happening, but I assure you, it is. And this is what the teacher said. In a way, why do you believe the teacher? Because they say it so passionately. Don't make that mistake. Don't think that it doesn't matter what you do, because it. And they always say about great yogins who realise emptiness to the extent that they can fly through space, like Milarepa. They can put their hands through rocks, they can turn into fire, they can turn into, shape shift and all the rest of it. And what do they always say? They are more careful about the cause and effects of karma than anybody else even, because they can see it is so real. So it's very odd, isn't it?
Mm.
It's very odd. So don't be naive. This is not going to be, easy. It's not going to be a pushover. If you're finding it difficult, good, because it's not obvious. It's something that we're going to have to approach with a great deal of respect and slowly, bit by bit, bearing in mind the kind of lives that the great yogins of the past have, or even these days, have to lead in order to go to really reach the level of somebody like Milarepa. So we're following in their footsteps, and we're getting very strong intuitions and inspirations, and we're making aspirations and pranidhanas, and we're following through. But to think, oh well, I should be able to do that by now. What's wrong with me? That's quite a naive thought. The fact you can't, you're still where you thought, still where you started. You think, well, that's good. At least I haven't slipped back. That's what the Dalai Lama says, doesn't it? He says, if at least you haven't slipped back, that means you must have been paddling very hard to keep on top of the waves of delusion that are rolling over us all the time. That they do threaten to drown us. It feels like that, doesn't it? And just to keep your head above water, remember the refuge, and keep making pranidhanas, and still be inspired to try to understand more deeply. Well, that's good. You can count that as good for us. We're still here. So that's a sort of an answer, isn't it?
Yes, excellent answer.
I
think I understood some of it.
Yeah, or wheeze the answer. But at least I'm acknowledging the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, so how can we bring a shift to that gap between opening and closing and solidifying? Gap between opening and then solidifying again, or closing again. How do we stay open and raw when it's painful and frightening? Well, it's difficult, isn't it? We have these habitual protective mechanisms, which sometimes actually quite helpful. So I don't think it helps to just be brutal. I think one has to realise it takes time, and that when very difficult things happen, we respond in a pretty habitual way. And yet that habitual way increases the problem. So then you look at that and you think, this doesn't help. Really notice it doesn't help. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Eventually it clicks. Oh, I'm going to have to approach this in a different way. But, pain is pain, suffering is suffering. This is what samsara is about. So the best you can hope for is some hope when you're suffering, that actually there is another way of dealing with it. And at least I'm trying to practice. At least I'm in the right place. At least I'm doing the right things. And gradually our sanity comes back to us. Like if you're thrown off. It doesn't really matter how far you're thrown off, because in some ways you never go anywhere. So even if you find you're overwhelmed and you think, oh, I can't go on anymore, you don't go anywhere, you're still there. When things have calmed down, you're still there, and nothing's changed. It's not too late. Now is the time when you think, oh, how did I forget? How did I forget about the Dharma when everything was going so bad? Well, that is just how it is. But now I've remembered, and now I'm in a better state of mind, I can start applying the Dharma so that next time I don't get so overwhelmed. But don't be surprised if you're still overwhelmed. It's not a sign that you've failed or a sign that, you're a no good person. It just shows that, it's difficult. And it's not hopeless. You haven't actually failed. It's not possible to fail. There's not such a thing as a failed person. People don't fail. They're still there. At the end of the day, they're still there. They're still there with their, exactly as they were at the beginning. They've still got the same heart. They're the same awareness, the same spaciousness, the same everything. So it may seem that something can overwhelm you. It hasn't really overwhelmed you. It's just that your thinking has got very stuck. And it does sometimes, doesn't it?
Always. Always gets stuck.
Always gets stuck. But not forever.
Seemingly.
It does seem like that, but if you check out, it hasn't actually got completely stuck. It seems like it, but if you actually look at it more carefully and think, if that is really true that it's completely stuck, how come I'm able to even question it? It's not actually completely stuck. It feels like it, and it can feel, in your body and everything, it can feel completely stuck. Okay, so this is what is one of these very important qualities, is called kshanti, patience. You could say it's like, don't panic, calm down, Okay, here we are again, but it's illusion actually, it's not actually true, and I'm able to even think that, which proves that it's not the whole of me. I am not completely stuck actually. And that's where you need to put your allegiance. I am not completely stuck. And that will unravel, gradually, bit by bit. And okay, you get a backlash, you go through it. Well, there's only one way, that's to keep coming back to your own basic sanity. And it's there. Absolutely. It has no possibility of going away. Interesting. It's not of the nature of something that could go away. It's more fundamental than any amount of confusion that's going on. It's like my friend Lama Putsi, when I was going berserk once, and he sort of poked me in the chest and said, because he was like that, and he said, you know how not to go berserk. And I thought, yes, I do. That was a wonderful teaching. That really was a wonderful teaching. So yes, I can just say, well, that's what we're working with, isn't it? We try the opening bit and we find that we're closed and we're stuck. And then we think, don't make it more complicated than that. Don't start laying a trip on yourself that you're no good, you're bad, or you failed, or blah blah. Those are just thinking and of no consequence. It's all much simpler. You're just stuck. So it's a bit like when you're in a bog sinking. The best thing to do is not struggle, isn't it? It just makes it worse. So just calm down and notice that there is slight movement. You've even noticed. I mean, the sati itself is telling you there's a slight movement. And that's all you've got. You've got that slight movement, so trust it. And just put up with the fact that it's horrible being stuck. Just put up with it. It's not the end of the world. You can be simple about it. I always say to people when they're suffering a lot of stuckness like that, I think, well, each of us is living our own, what we call a vimoksha. It's a story of liberation. So the story of an enlightened being is called a vimoksha. It's a story of how they became enlightened, their whole story. So like Milarepa, he was very, there's a story of how he was a black magician and he killed people and then he repented and then he practiced very hard. He reached enlightenment. So you think, oh right, so even if I've done very bad things, if I really practice hard like Milarepa, I also could reach enlightenment. So if you've been practicing black magic and you've killed people, you might think, oh, there's hope for me. So in the same way, however bad we are, the worse we are, we can think, well, our vimoksha is really going to help people because I was stuck for decades and I was hopeless for decades, and then I reached enlightenment, and people will read that and they think, oh wow, she was stuck like me for decades and then she reached enlightenment. So this is the most inspiring story of vimoksha that I've ever heard. So you can think like that. You think, well, this is going to be a very interesting vimoksha. Okay, the danger.
I think you might want Sarah to explain this one because
A spiritual tradition. Without a spiritual tradition, when something opens up for clients we might be teaching mindfulness to, which is difficult to explain in a secular way, this could result in a psychic spiritual crisis, which Rizing Shikpa raised in October teaching weekend, and would be interested to know what I think about that. Plus, how much can be shared if I start to see things in a particular way? Should that be held, or should I trust people? Right. That does happen. I mean, it happens not just for mindfulness teachers, but it can happen for Tai Chi teachers, yoga teachers, it can happen for Dharma teachers, Buddhist teachers, that something can be triggered and people's energy system shoots out of control and they start experiencing what would probably be called psychotic symptoms, but perhaps if they panic, they can really unbalance them. If they don't panic, they're just in a very strange state and become pretty dysfunctional, can be for quite a long time. So this does happen. It does happen to meditators, yogins. It's well known to happen to yogins, but they don't talk about it very much because it might put people off. Don't tell them about that, it'll put them off. But it can happen. It can happen that things can be triggered that have, especially if somebody's, you don't know what you've been doing in past lives. Something can be triggered, and if that has happened with people that you're, even people the best you can do is to support them through it and reassure them about their own basic sanity and to not panic. And whatever's happening will find it will rebalance itself somehow, although one can't say how quickly. And it can lead to a lot of pain, suffering, mentally, physically. I mean, it's well known. And it can be triggered by any of the things I mentioned, or not at all. It can just happen. Sometimes it happens when people take some kind of medication or drugs or something like that. It sets something off. Sometimes it's already happened to people and that's why they're alcoholic. They're taking alcohol as a way to kind of alleviate the symptoms. So I think there's probably more of it about than people, talk about. Because if you can manage it at all, you tend not to talk about it. because mostly people don't really understand what you're talking about. So I find myself talking to people quite surprising how often I'm talking to people who are having these kind of experiences, or they've happened in relationship to the various things I mentioned, and they sometimes have a very strong sense that it's something spiritual that's happening, and if they talk about it, it will get treated as some kind of mental illness that isn't really acknowledging what they feel is possibly very positive about it. So I think the best that we can do for people like that is to help them through it as best. Again, what are they going to do? They're going to have to put up with it. But gradually, not to lose confidence, and just bit by bit recognise that they can find their own sanity within that, and that the body and mind does have an ability to restore its own balance and do things that are more balancing. You need to do things that are quite grounding, perhaps even that are not. You don't want to get too much into your head, too intellectual about things. You want to kind of keep in your body, do things that are sometimes working physically rather than trying to think too much. Thinking too much is the biggest problem when the energies are unbalanced. Tibetans, well, the first thing they'll say to you is, don't think, don't think, don't think. It's not a good time for thinking, because your energy is whatever it's doing. It's amazing what it can do, to be honest. So not thinking too much, relaxing as much as you can, and maybe doing work, physical things that you can bring your awareness into your body, which is kind of grounded, because you're here in this world at this time. It's almost like your body is your samadhi, your stable samadhi. Of course, you're not always going to have your body, but while you've got it, it can be helpful. And in a way, you always will have the equivalent of a body. Even when this body dies, there will still be the equivalent of what is, if you like, grounding in your own mandala. You are who you are, what you are. You're grounded in that. You can rely on that, even if the energy is going a bit berserk. But what happens often is also you get hallucinations, and they can be quite alarming, especially if you don't realise that you're hallucinating. And once you realise you're hallucinating, then it's not so bad. But when you don't realise, it can get... And then if you get really frightened in that state, that's when people really get quite dangerous. Because, they start to really believe what they're hallucinating, and they feel very threatened, and then they might start attacking people because they feel they're under attack. We all know about this, don't we? So I think there's people in the room who are more experienced with this kind of thing than I am, but the general principle is there. They do still, they're still there. Their heart is still really there, or our heart is still there, regardless of what's going on with our energy system. And we can be reached, but it means everybody has to not panic. So how much can be shared? I'm not quite sure what the question is. So is that talking about if you're experiencing this yourself, is it good to talk about it? Is that the question, or what?
No, I was thinking more of kind of Dharma perspective. If it's changing the way that I perceive things, then inevitably that has an impact on how I'm communicating with other people. But sometimes there's a question of
how much can they take?
On that?
How much can they take?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you do have to be careful because, I think it can get very distressing when you talk to people and then they start trying to tell you what's what. And they're not right, but now they've got the bit between their teeth and, you sort of wonder how you're going to get out of it again. So I think you do have to test the water a bit, and if you feel it's a person that's good to talk to, and if it's not, then I would trust your own intuition, really, because it could just get a nightmare. People can be very opinionated, and then you've got that extra thing to deal with now. Not only did you have your already something that you having to handle, but now you've got to handle this other person who's got disturbed by what you just said. So I think try to keep it simple. I would personally, wouldn't try and talk about it with just anyone. I'd be quite selective. Don't know if that's helpful.
I suppose the other thing I was thinking is when through awareness practice things do open up for someone, but they're not linked in to a spiritual tradition or a lineage.
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult. It's quite interesting though, when I've talked to people who don't belong to a lineage and things are opening up for them and they're wondering what to do, and then I talk to them about needing to be connected. They seem to recognise they do. They tend to recognise, yes, and then they tend to find things that they are connected to. So somehow the conversation goes in that kind of direction where they start talking about what they have real confidence in or what they feel they're really connected to, and then I sort of help to encourage them to connect to that more strongly, and that does seem to help. Or offer them whatever connection I can offer them, as it were. Because that's the terrible thing about it, if you feel isolated and cut off and all this is happening and you're not sure how to even relate to it all, and it's you. It's like it's something that's really going on within you, and you feel it's saying something significant, but what? Yeah. I think sometimes in the West we're a little bit naive, thinking that this spiritual path kind of is sort of upwards and onwards. You just kind of, it has to be all good and it will be nice and it won't be disturbing. But if you read about any experienced spiritual tradition, it's full of the ups and downs and the difficulties and problems that are possible. Just to encourage you.
I read an article, it was a couple of months ago, I think it was called something like The Dark Side of Mindfulness.
Oh yes, I've seen that article.
Suggesting that there was a bit of not a cover-up, but in the sort of secular way, that it was happening more, that people were having problems with it more.
Right, and it's being admitted.
Sort of, publicised.
But they always say the percentage that it succeeds for. Because there's quite a big percentage that is they're not reporting success. So this is starting to be recognised now. Yeah. But I think the way it's being taught by the people that I've talked to, it's very gentle, and it's in a sense not much more than what is you might have even worked out for yourself by common sense. Like how to, it's the effect of the course. This is my hope, really. Is the effect of the course is that you're actually giving yourself permission to spend time and give some sort of status to quite simple things that actually normally you would kind of dismiss as I wouldn't have time for, it doesn't matter, it's not something for me, or that's just selfish. So to overcome all that resistance, you have a definite course, definite time that you spend attending in a way that you naturally can and should be attending, whether it's called mindfulness or whatever it's called, out of just more sanity. I can't imagine with that approach you would have above average amount of people having problems. I think whatever you do, there's always that problem. There's going to be people that something's triggered in them in an unfortunate way. But I can't imagine that the mindfulness is going to be much worse than, for example, people going around teaching Buddhism. And I think probably if you looked at how many problems there were arising from that, it would probably be higher than for the mindfulness 8-week course, I suspect. So yes, there is that danger there, and we do need to learn to be aware of that and sensitive to that. And I think more than anything that people maintain their confidence through whatever experience they're having. That it's not a sign that they're, that everything's out of control and they're, it's all hopeless. It's not out of control. It is out of control in a sense, but it's not the essential you that's out of control. I remember a friend of mine who, she had a lot of problems with her energy when we were in India together, and she was telling me that she was having so much hallucination and so much, so unstable that she thought the only thing to do was to sit still and just stay still and not go out, just stay still. And then she was doing her mantras and sitting very still. And then this Lama was coming by and seeing her sitting there every day, and apparently he started telling to his students, "You should be like her, you see how stable she is." And she burst out laughing. She said, he obviously couldn't see my mind. I wasn't going out because I was worried about what I might do. It's quite interesting, isn't it? She's able to hold that, just, okay, I'll just kind of stay with it, and she came through it all fine. Yes, that's a good story, isn't it? Yeah, I love that story. It's a good job he can't see my mind. Okay, so maybe leave that one. How are we doing for time?
Originally we were planning to start 5:30 for meditation, but you did say it just depended how long you wanted to teach for, so supper's not till 6:30.
Okay, so I'll do a bit more because I've got quite a lot here. So here again is the question, how do we deal with anger that is triggered by the power of discernment that something is wrong? Something clearly wrong, like somebody's killing somebody. So that's what I was saying this morning. Sati is becoming aware of the situation. It's okay, the sati part of it is you just take in the information, you're not reacting, you're not judging, you're just taking in the information, but then that leads to action. It doesn't mean, okay, well, I have to accept that everything, there is no good or no bad. That people trot that out, don't they? There is no good or is no bad. There's no mistakes. You think, yeah, it's nonsense. Of course there is. What else are we saying when we're saying, even if you say, it's good to practice equanimity. Well, why? Because it's good. Obviously, there's good and bad, but the thing is, when you're practicing sati, to try to be as aware as possible of what's happening, rather than imposing your judgments straight away. But obviously, we have to apply judgment, not judgmental in the sense of a prejudice, but respond to the situation in a discerning way. So if somebody is doing something dangerous and threatening behaviour, then you have to meet that with some equal force that's going to protect them and everybody else. So we don't want to kind of think, oh, well, if I'm a mindful person, then I don't judge people good or bad. I don't judge things good or bad. I just I stay back and just, that's disempowering yourself and everyone else. It's not useful at all. And sometimes you have to act quicker than, you would prefer. You see something dangerous and you just have to act quickly. And I think if you really trust yourself, the chances of that going terribly wrong, then, I don't think you need to worry too much if you have to act quickly. It may be a mistake, but at least it was, oh, sorry, I thought you were just going to stab that person. That's why I knocked you on the ground. That's why I knocked you out. Oh, right. Well, no, I wasn't actually. I was just going to hand them the knife to cut the cake. But, okay, it was a mistake. Sorry. Yeah, I think it's very easy to get the idea somehow. It's really funny. I was talking about this with Tara the other day. You have this idea that no judgment, and then you judge. You judged! You did this terrible thing of judging. It can't, it's okay to judge. There isn't anything wrong with judging. We just said there's nothing wrong, whatever comes up. Well, judging came up. There's nothing wrong with judging. It's okay. Anger's okay. Judging is okay. Everything's okay. But only up to a point, isn't it? Up to a point. If you want to see what the judgmental mind does, you don't want to judge it too quickly. If the judgmental mind comes up, you've got to let it come up and recognise it. Oh, is that, what's going on with that? Or anger comes up. Well, what's going on with that? Pain comes up. Okay, what's going on with that? Judgmentalness comes up again. Oh, what's going on with that? It's all judgment all the time, maybe. Okay, well, how's that? What's going on with that? And that's not because you're now going to just stay always like that. It's the opportunity for it to get a bit of breathing space, for you to familiarise yourself with it, get a better sense of how it's operating and how much flexibility there is in that situation. It's not that, okay, whatever comes up, I've got to leave it as it is and just stay like that. Because I think sometimes if you take the instructions too literally, you're trying to get them right. That's really a mistake. With any kind of instruction about awareness or, meditation or sati or anything like that, any instruction, you have to really look and see what effect it's having on you. Don't tell yourself, oh, I should be able to do this. No. Think, when they say that, what effect does that have if I say that? Well, that's no good. Why would they say it? Why would they say that? Sometimes you have to go back and ask, why do you say that? Because when I do that, I get this effect. And then say, well, don't say that, say something else. Or sometimes you can find for yourself, oh, they must mean, oh yeah, they say that, but what they mean is they must mean this, because you can feel in your body, you can feel that must be what's meant. And you must go by that, and not by trying to be literal-minded to think, well, they said that, and there must be something wrong with me because it doesn't work. Don't think that way round. Think, there must be something wrong with the way those words are affecting me. Not there's something wrong with me. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, I hope that's helpful. We can be aware of the need to be aware of what obscures what presumably we want to be aware of. It's amazing that, isn't it? We can be aware of what obscures what we want to be aware of. So how many awarenesses are there? Was that a kind of question, or what was it?
It was written as an enjoyable whimsy on the nature of awareness.
And also the nature of the way concepts and words work, isn't it? Because there's only awareness, and yet you end up talking as if there's more than one awareness. Like there's one self, but you end up talking as if there's more than one self. You know, you're talking as if, there can't be more than one self, but you talk as if there's one self. Like you're watching yourself doing something. So which is you? Yeah. Talking about killing yourself. You are going to kill you. Which one's you? So we do that because language is actually very, the language isn't very accurate to reality. So that's why you can talk about awareness being aware of itself, which doesn't make sense in some ways because awareness can't be an object of awareness because it is the awareness that is aware of the object. But we can still talk as if one could be aware of awareness. As if awareness, Or you could argue with that and say it's illogical, which a lot of Buddhists, do as part of their training. You notice that's illogical. So is that enough on that? Any more whimsy? It's good though, especially when you're looking in a meditative way. You're just kind of not exactly trying to work it out intellectually, and not exactly trying to just dismiss it as being a meaningless thought. But it's kind of what I call is a kind of a meditative thought. Just sharpens your awareness, sharpens your meditation practice, because you're noticing something, and just a few words, kind of, Do you know what I mean? You don't have to treat them as if they've got no meaning, because they do. They have very important meaning. Okay, I don't know how many of these I'm going to do. Perhaps that's enough. We could then meditate and I can finish them tomorrow. Sounds good, doesn't it? Okay.